Hello everyone, welcome back to the Wee Larder channel. Today we're going to be making 3 delicious Scottish wartime recipes. Now I'm actually taking recipes from this cookbook today, Cooking in Wartime by Elizabeth Craig. This is actually a first edition cookbook and it's really good. It's kind of patched together, it's fallen apart a little bit, but I was really lucky to get a copy of this and it's a really nice cookbook. I'm actually trying to stick to the original recipes as close as possible. Some of the recipes do have eggs, so inside this cookbook we have special wartime recipes and we also have others which are familiar dishes adapted so that they can be served in spite of the war. So a couple of my recipes do have 1 egg. You can try using dried egg if you want to. The recipes in this actual book did say to add in eggs. I personally thought they would have been using dried eggs, but then you did get eggs as part of your rations, I believe, and I guess if you lived in the countryside as well, you would have had more eggs than what was available in the towns and stuff. So there are also some amazing recipes in here which are handwritten, and I can just imagine like the people writing them down, having a blether, getting a recipe from somebody. So these are really special recipes, and I promise I'm going to share them with you in the future as well. So the owner of this cookbook would have written them in maybe at a later date as well, maybe not in wartime. The writing is really faded, so my guess is it was pretty close to then. I also have a really old Christmas card in this book as well for some and there's a recipe in the back for some chocolate squares. I'm going to share that with you at some point too. And there's also a wee insert from magazine. That's what I absolutely love about cookbooks, old cookbooks, is there's always so much character with them. I think there's also another recipe in here from, it's written on a Salvation Army piece of paper and it says at the top, on active services with the Canadian Forces. So this Scottish cookbook must have made its way all the way over there, which is quite amazing. And there's another recipe on the back for ice and sugar, I believe. So anyway, the 3 recipes that we are making today are for salmon fish cakes. Really easy, really affordable recipe. This recipe can be used at any time. It doesn't have to be just to experiment with wartime recipes. This is a really nice family recipe that's so simple, so easy to throw together, and it's a perfect pantry style recipe as well, because you can just use a tin of salmon, and I used a tin of wild salmon, and it was pretty affordable to buy as well, and tatties, and there wasn't much else to the recipe, so it's a real simple recipe. We enjoyed it with some hot mustard. The mustard was coincidentally called Spitfire mustard, which and it literally blew my head off. It was so hot. Anyway, the second recipe we're making is a lovely marmalade cake, so we're going to be making that. Again, really easy. I use my own marmalade in this recipe too. And the third recipe is for a delicious golden steamed pudding. So let's get started. I hope you enjoy these delicious Scottish wartime recipes. So we're going to get started on our salmon fish cakes. This is such an easy recipe and it's really cheap to make as well. So we're going to start by boiling our tatties in a pan. So we're going to make up our mash first of all. So I've just popped all the tatties into a pan with some salt. And we are going to add our can of salmon into the bowl. It's not the prettiest salmon to look at, but it does actually really work out nice in this recipe. If you don't want to do the wartime version, you could use fresh salmon if you wanted to as well. So I'm just picking some of the bones out here. There was a few bones in the tin versions, but they were you could have eaten them. They were pretty much like edible in the tin salmon. Anyway, I took out some of the major bones and I just mashed that down, added in a little bit of salt and pepper, and I've just gone on to prepare the mashed tatties as well. So I had to use a little bit of coconut oil, I will admit, because I'd actually ran out of butter when I was making this recipe. Stuff like that happens in my kitchen, but if you just follow the ingredients, you will just use the butter instead of the coconut oil. So I'm adding in the mash here, or I think in some of the wartime recipes as well they used margarine. So if you want to use the margarine, go ahead. I don't really have margarine in my kitchen, so I've just used butter. So I'm adding the mash into the salmon here, And we're just going to give that a really good mix through, and season again with salt and pepper if you need to, and just add in a little bit of herbs as well. If you've got herbs in your garden, fresh herbs are even better to use if you want to use that instead. Otherwise, just use a wee bit of dried herbs, just whatever you fancy. So we're going to add our egg into our bowl here. And we're just going to take small, sort of bit larger than a golf ball sized pieces, and we're just going to roll it in your hands, flatten it down. I'm just going to whisk up the egg there as well. And we're just going to pop it into the egg first and then into the oatmeal. So you just need to really lightly hold your piece of salmon here, your salmon fish cake. Just because you could squash it if you hold it too hard. So you just really want to hold it very lightly and just roll it around in your hands just to get it completely covered. So they should be quite firm, but just soft at the same time as well. So if you continue that with all of your tatty and salmon mix until you have a plate full of salmon fish cakes. So again, the recipe said to add a good dose of fat into the pan. I would normally have used butter, but as I said, I actually run out for this recipe. So I've used coconut oil here. So just use whatever you have in your kitchen. I would recommend coconut oil, butter, or lard would even work. Bacon dripping would be good for this too. Some kind of traditional fat will work really well. So we're going to cook those for a few minutes until golden brown on one side, and then flip them and cook them for a further few minutes on the other side until they are nice and golden. They are actually a little bit more golden than what you're seeing here in my video. It's just quite bright, and it's just the colours that have come out on the camera. So they are nice and golden when they are ready. And you just want to sort of break one open as well and just make sure that they're hot in the middle too. You could also oven these as well if you wanted to, instead of cooking them in the frying pan, but I like to cook them in the pan. I think they came out really nice this way. So they should look something like this when they are ready. As I've said before, these are so easy to make. It's such a simple recipe. You could make a huge batch of them and pop them in the freezer if you wanted to as well. Now, I did try them with this mustard sauce that was actually called Spitfire, coincidentally, and it was so hot. Oh my goodness. Anyway, we're going to be making our golden pudding next. So this is our delicious steamed golden pudding. Now, I actually ground up my own rice for this recipe. It was a little bit bitty, so you will be better if you can find ground rice in the supermarket. That would definitely work better. So we're going to mash all of our tatties in our bowl there, and just until they are nice and soft. It did actually say in the recipe to run it through a sieve, but personally I thought that was going to take forever, so I just mashed them up, and we added in our ground rice. So if you can get proper ground rice flour, that would be better than grinding up yourself, definitely going by my experience anyway. So we're just going to give that a good mix through until it is well combined. This pudding was actually really easy to make again, but it was so delicious, really, really nice. And not too sweet as well. We do add in the golden syrup here, but it still doesn't make the pudding like ridiculously sweet. It's just sweet enough. Compared to our sort of modern day puddings, it wasn't actually that sweet, but we enjoyed it, and we had a little bit of extra golden syrup on top as well. So we're adding in our suet there. And we're just going to pop in our egg. Now, you can add in dried egg if you want to be completely authentic to the wartime recipe. I don't actually have dried in my egg in my kitchen, so I've just added in an egg. And we've added in our baking powder and some milk there as well. We're just going to give this a good mix through until it is a good sort of cake batter consistency. And we're then going to pop that into a greased steaming bowl. So just make sure it is mixed through well. I've added a pinch of salt there. They definitely didn't have Himalayan pink salt in wartime recipes. But just add in whatever kind of salt you have in your kitchen. Sea salt is usually my favourite. So I've added in a little tablespoon or two of golden syrup into the bottom of my greased pudding dish. This wasn't actually in the recipe, but I know that this is going to create a really nice syrupy top to my sponge, so I just added that in as a little extra there. If you want to be authentic to the wartime recipe, you don't need to add in your golden syrup in the bottom of this dish here, but it did come out really nice. So we're just going to smooth that down into our pudding dish there, and we're going to add on our greaseproof paper. Now normally I would add my greaseproof paper with a layer of tin foil as well, so I would fold the tin foil over with the greaseproof paper at the same time and add them both onto the top here with the fold in the middle so that it can expand if it needs to when it's cooking. So you will have seen me use that in other videos. I didn't actually have tin foil. I seem to be running out of everything for this video. But so I've just used greaseproof paper, and it was totally fine. It came out fine. But if you've got the tin foil, you want to use the tin foil as well, because it does keep the heat in and help to steam the pudding. So we're going to give that a good tight knot there, and we're just going to cut round just to trim it off. Pop it into a pan of simmering water. You want to put a plate in the bottom there as well, just so that it doesn't touch the base of the pan when it's cooking and burn. We're just going to cook that for 2.5 hours approximately. So you want to check that it's cooked when it is ready. It should look something like this, and it smells delicious. So because I didn't use the ground rice, you can see the texture was a little bit not lumpy, but a little bit sort of like the right, there's chunky pieces of rice there, obviously. So when you use your ground rice, you are going to get a smoother texture in your pudding than I have here. But it was just as delicious. It was super lovely, and you can see the golden syrup on the top of the sponge there as well. So it's very similar to like a syrup sponge from like my childhood, the kind of thing my mum would have made. So really, really delicious, really easy. You can enjoy it with custard or some whipped cream if you want to be overindulgent. Not that they would have had those things extreme, like very available in wartime, but never mind. So we're just going to slice a bit out here just to show you. It is nice and cooked on the inside. Really, really delicious. Trying it with the mashed tatty as well, which is just something different. We kind of dropped it there. But it was really lovely. So it was a really nice texture as well. Very nice sponge-like texture. Super delicious. So moving on to my favorite recipe was the marmalade cake. This was so delicious. Again, really easy to make. There was margarine called for in the recipe, but I actually used butter because I don't really use margarine at all in my bacon. So if you want to be authentic to the original wartime recipe, you could use the margarine instead, or if that's what you use in your kitchen anyway, just use that. So we're just going to sieve all of our flour there into my mixing bowl, my lovely mixing bowl that was sent to me from the States. I'm so grateful for it. A lovely lady sent it over to me as a gift. It's really, really nice, and I've been using it loads in the kitchen as well. So we're going to rub our butter into our flour there in our mixing bowl. So just make sure you have completely incorporated the butter into the flour. It should look slightly like a breadcrumb type consistency when it is completely rubbed through. Now I'm adding all my dried fruit in here. I was a little short on some of the raisins, I think it was, so I had to add in a dried fruit mix that I have. Just use whatever you have in your kitchen. Just make sure you have the correct quantities. But if you don't have currants, for example, and you have another dried fruit mix, just use it up. It'll be completely fine. So we're going to add in our sugar there as well. I did actually have to swap out into my larger bowl. I didn't realize how big this recipe was going to get. So I swapped out into my larger pink bowl there. So just give it a good stir through until everything is well combined. Break up any bits of sugar. Sometimes find the brown sugar gets a little bit lumpy. And add in your marmalade. So I went for approximately 4 tablespoons of marmalade. I just had some in a bowl that was left over from when I was making my own marmalade a few weeks before, and I just used it all up. So we're going to give that a good stir through there. Now I absolutely love marmalade. It's one of my favourite things to make, and especially on toast in the morning. So delicious. I must share a recipe with you sometime. So we're going to add in our milk there. There's no eggs in this recipe, which is really nice. I really like not using the egg, and it still came out with a really nice texture, and it was really moist as well, this cake. So add in a little bit more milk if you need to, just make sure that you have a really nice cake batter kind of consistency there. So you're looking for something like this. We're going to pour it into our cake pan, and we're going to pop it in a preheated oven at 160. I just added in the spices there as well before I forget. And just make sure you've greased up your cake pan as well, or lined it with greaseproof paper, whatever you want to do. I actually do both because I just find that both of them just works really well. So we're just going to add all of it into there, and we're going to pop it into our oven for approximately an hour and 15 an hour to an hour and a half. Just make sure that it's cooked all the way through. Pop a cake pin through and make sure that it comes out clean. So it should look like this once it is cooked, and I've actually cooled it a little bit as well, otherwise it would not be touching the cake pan like this. And we're just going to remove that and pop the cake out and just take all the paper off. I just find it's a little bit easier sometimes just to cool it, especially for like a really dense fruit cake as well. So we're just going to pull all of our paper off and the bottom of the cake pan. Just pray that it all comes off in one piece. It did actually. This is a really lovely cake. Really enjoyed this. We had the leftovers with custard. The kids really enjoyed it as well. A lovely fruity cake. We're just going to top the cake off with marmalade as well. So just make sure that it is pretty cool to touch before you add your marmalade. Otherwise it's just going to go all runny and melt down the sides. So I like to get all the chunky pieces on top of this cake just for the texture and for the visual look as well. So there wasn't actually additional topping in the original recipe, but I thought it would look really nice with the marmalade on the top. So I've just added it in there, and it is super delicious. So we're just going to cut in. Someone's floating about in their pajamas again. There's always people floating about in their pajamas in my house for some reason, especially if I'm filming at the weekend and everyone's feeling a bit lazy. Or if it's early evening as well. I'm quite often filming in the early evening, so that's why you quite often see people floating around in their pajamas. So our lovely cake looks like this. So you can see I've used some different dried fruits in there. If you want to stick to the original recipe, you can use all the currants and raisins that are in the ingredients. But as I've said, if you've got other dried fruit mixes to use up, just pop them in. As long as they are the same sort of size as raisins and currants, you'll be fine. So super delicious, really nice texture, really moist and lovely with custard and cream. So I hope you enjoyed making all of these lovely wartime recipes. As I said before, we did use an egg for the a couple of them, like the salmon and the golden pudding. They were in the recipes themselves, so although eggs would have been limited, they might have saved them to use for something special. And if they lived in the countryside, they probably would have had access to more eggs as well. If you want to try using dried eggs, by all means you could do that instead. So I hope you enjoyed experimenting with these wartime recipes. Let me know in the comments below if you made any of them or if you enjoyed this video. And if you did enjoy this video, please feel free to give this video a big thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, you could click the subscribe button and the bell next to it. I will see you guys again soon. If you're over on Instagram, pop over and say hello, share your pictures of your recipes if you made them as well. And that's about it for me. So I hope to see you guys all again soon. Take care. Lots of love. Bye bye.